Welcome everyone to today's masterclass, which is really about how you can rethink your approach to teaching by using design thinking, a powerful mindset used globally, as we will see, to solve real world problems. In this masterclass, we'll see how design thinking can be applied in education to make our teaching more student-focused, more engaging, and more effective. And as we go through the session, if you'd like to make a note of any questions, then please do so, and we'll take those at the end of the presentation. So, as I said, welcome. My name is Kevin Pace, and I'll be taking you through the masterclass today. Now, I've been an educator for 30 years now, working in schools and colleges, universities, and as a freelance lecturer and professional trainer. Little bit about me: I was an examiner and moderator and scrutineer for the UK's largest examination body for 9 years. And I've worked in and with central and local government, both here in the UK and overseas. I'm also a small business owner, and I'm a business consultant, and I work predominantly in the education and the not-for-profit sectors. For the past 4 years or so, I've been working with ISDC and other educational institutions in India, delivering business studies and international business studies lectures for Indian students all across India, as well as students in China and in Kenya. I live in the UK in a county called Staffordshire, which I've highlighted on the map for you, just to give you some context of the geography. And I'm about 120 miles from London, about 250 miles from Edinburgh, and about a 40-minute flight away from Dublin in Ireland. I've also lived in the USA and continue to visit the USA about 3 times a year. And I have a variety of business interests, from California to Florida and various places in between. So I have a sort of US-UK perspective on business and on life. And I've also worked in Canada, in Cyprus and in Spain. And in all of my career, I've used design thinking at various stages and in various components. And I'm excited to share that with you today as we go through. So the session objectives then for today. Now, this session is not about hands-on prototyping. We're going to cover that in another masterclass. Today, instead, we're going to focus on how, as educators, we can rethink our teaching methods and our teaching approaches to make classroom delivery more effective, more engaging, using the design thinking principles. So the content of the session then today is to understand the fundamentals of design thinking, to learn how to use it for teaching and not just for activities, to discover some wide applications and some practical tips for classroom use. And I really want to inspire you today around the whole sort of concept of design thinking. So, put simply, what is design thinking then? Well, design thinking is used by a broad range of individuals and organisations across various fields, including business and education and healthcare and technology and many more areas. And major companies like Google and Apple and Airbnb utilise design thinking to drive innovation and solve complex problems. In other words, it's a process for solving problems using creativity with empathy right at the centre. So we can describe it then as a human-centred problem-solving framework, a problem-solving approach that focuses on human-centred solutions by really delving deep to understand users' needs and challenges. And in our context, obviously, that's students, and then to develop innovative solutions. So design thinking typically is different from other forms of sort of problem solving concepts, because it's user centric. So instead of focusing on the problem itself, it focuses on the solution. It's solution focused. It's always about getting to the solution. I'm going to walk you through the 5 stages just briefly at this stage, and we'll get more into them as we go through. So the 5 stages, or the 5 steps, as you might see it also. The first one is empathize. So empathy is really important. If we're going to use human-centric solutions, if we're going to search for those, then clearly empathy is a really crucial part of that. So understanding students' needs and their challenges and their struggles, more than just merely observing them, though, being really willing to dig within them to get to some real understanding. So it means engagement rather than just simply, sort of observation. So we use empathy as a way to really understand those struggles, those challenges, and those needs. Then we define. So we identify what the core challenge or the core approach that we need to do is. So what's the core teaching or the core learning challenge in our context as educators? What's the core learning challenge that we're faced with here? Define it, understand it clearly. And then what we want to do next is ideate. So we want to use ideas. We want to brainstorm a range of multiple different ways in which we can get to beyond simply the problem and find those solutions. And the best way to describe this really is that it needs to be almost like a brainstorming frenzy to unleash that sort of creativity. And when working with students around design thinking, then the classroom should pulsate really with ideas and creativity, and no idea should be too out there to start with, because that fosters then that real creative process to get to those multiple ways in which we can meet this challenge. The next stage then is prototype. So this is about creating tangible and conceptual representations of solutions so that we can have some real options for trying new things. So new approaches, new thinking, new strategies, new delivery. We've got to that point where we've really understood what we can do in response to this. And then the 5th and final stage is to test. Test the solutions, observe the results, gather the feedback, and then obviously fine-tune this as we go through. So an obvious example might be a teacher that notices some students are a little bit sluggish or drowsy early in the morning. So she talks to the students to gain a real understanding of where the challenges lie. So that's the empathy side of it, and then defines the core issue, which is really about responding to this sort of sluggishness, this drowsiness in the morning, these sort of low energy levels, and ideates a range of activities which involve sort of warm-up activities and trials, a 5-minute energizer at the start of every day, and then refines it based on how well the students respond, how well they enjoy it, and if it has the overall output, the outcome that's desired, which of course is to increase energy levels in the classroom. And as I said earlier, a professional trainer and public speaker, often I find myself, particularly in the afternoon session straight after lunch, of having to inject some energy back into the room. And again, I'm sure that will be familiar with you. So there's an example of a teacher that's using design thinking to find some solutions to that particular challenge. So it's not so much about teaching what to teach, it's much more about rethinking how we teach and the approaches that we use. Why it matters? Well, design thinking can be effectively applied in teaching, and it can be used to create engaging and innovative learning experiences to help us to more personalize our approach to individual needs. So group needs and individual needs. So it helps us to understand diverse learners. It helps us to better understand their individual needs, the dynamics at play between them. It helps us to solve the challenges that present themselves in the classroom in a creative way, to come up with new ideas and new approaches, and be willing, to think a little bit outside the box. And remember what I said about that brainstorming. Being really willing to think a broad range of potential solutions to trial, and then being willing then to redesign lessons and teaching approaches based on the learning that we've gained from adopting that sort of design thinking approach. And whether it's how we assign homework, or how we handle distractions, or how we explain a concept to the students, design thinking will give us new ways to tailor make our methods based on real student and authentic student needs. In other words, what we're looking to do is to go on a journey to inspire innovation and champion transformative change. And that's really what this is all about. Here's a quick example then. So this example is a history class. And the history teacher realizes that students are struggling when it comes to remembering historical dates. So we've identified what the problem is. The students are forgetting key dates in the historical sort of timeline. Now, of course, the tried and tested method of this, as we do as teachers, might be to increase the number of revision sessions and to keep going over the dates again and again. But instead, in this example, the teacher decides to try design thinking, to try to problem solve by focusing, using empathy on the students' needs and then the challenges. So an innovative solution to this challenge was to co-create a visual historical timeline. So with the class, to co-create this visual timeline, which then meant students would pick out a date, a critical date in the timeline, make a visual card, and then together as a team they built a visual wall. And the outcome to that was the activity was fun and enjoyable. Students were really enjoyed the opportunity to be involved in that way. So because of that, they were more engaged, and ultimately were able to recall those key dates in that historical timeline. And that ultimately was what the outcome that we were searching for. So clearly that's an example. So let's think then about how we can use design thinking in lesson planning. And ultimately, why do we want to do that? So if we've seen the benefits, again, as you've just seen from that example there, where we can use design thinking to challenge ourselves to find innovative ways to solve problems, again, by using that human-centric approach, by focusing in on need, then ultimately that will help us to increase student engagement. Design thinking makes learning more relevant and more hands-on, which can increase student motivation and ultimately increase student engagement. And of course, when students are engaged in their learning, then there typically will be more learning going on. The next reason to develop a design thinking approach to lesson planning is to support the students to develop 21st century skills. Design thinking fosters approaches to critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, collaboration and team working, all of which are keys to success in the modern world. And we know, don't we, all over the world, employers talk a lot about students coming into the workplace lacking those, what they as employers see as really critical skills: problem solving, creativity, collaboration and team working, and that ability to think critically, to think around a subject and be brave enough and have the courage to come up with new ideas and to be creative in finding solutions to problems that exist. The next one is to improve learning outcomes. By engaging in the design process, students ultimately gain a deeper understanding of the material that's being discussed, and therefore can develop a more nuanced perspective, a greater sense of seeing things from different sides rather than just one particular perspective. So a teacher will outline a particular concept, for example, and the student sees that concept from one perspective only. By engaging in design thinking, students can learn to think around a subject and also gain a deeper understanding. And the fourth reason why lesson planning should include design thinking is that it provides flexibility and adaptability. Design thinking can be adapted, as we will see. Design thinking can be adapted to all subjects for all age groups in a variety of different ways. And so, again, what's the process that we want to look to do this? And so, first things first is empathise with student needs. We've seen repeatedly now already how important that empathy is, to empathise with student need. So what part of the topic is confusing students? And again, it's not just being that sort of superficial layer of this, so that we just gain that sort of superficial layer of understanding. It's really being willing to dig below that and perform more of a deep dive into understanding the challenges of the students, what their needs are, their learning styles, the learning styles we're using, the preferred learning styles of the students, but also their experiences. How can we use their experiences to their advantage when it comes to this? So it's really looking at the learning from the student's perspective and really trying to understand by using that empathetic mindset to really try to understand where the needs are. Then we define the key learning barriers. So having carried out this deep dive, having now really used empathy to understand more about the student needs and the problem to be solved, then we can define what those key barriers are. What are the issues? Is it abstractness? Is it too abstract? Is it pace? Is it a lack of prior knowledge or a lack of experience that they can bring to this? And remember that design thinking is solution based and user centric. So again, what we're looking to do here is to focus on the solution, not on the problem itself. And that's a really important distinction. We're focusing on the solutions, not the problems themselves. And then once we've been able to do that, then we can clearly articulate what the key learning barriers are and what that means for us in terms of our learning objectives. Then we can ideate diverse teaching strategies. So again, this is that brainstorming frenzy again, unleashing creativity into the mix to come up with different approaches, different ways, different methods to explain the topic or deliver the materials and just improve the situation to that which existed previously. Then the next stage is to prototype those new approaches. So again, to create tangible and conceptual representations of solutions which equip us then to be able to try out the new methods. We've got to be in a position, these have got to exist. They've got to not just be a theoretical exercise. We've then got to move them so that they actually exist and enable us then to try those methods out and be willing to try and be willing sometimes to fail also. And then to test. And of course, as teachers and as educators, our natural tendency is always to reflect. So to test the materials and the responses of the students, gather some input and adapt and continue to reflect and to refine as is necessary. Just give me 1 second, just have a drink. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a sort of broad introduction into design thinking and how we can use design thinking in teaching and in lesson planning. So why we should and how we can. Now, it's important to mention that design thinking does not belong to any one subject. So if on the seminar today we've got maths teachers and science teachers, and we've got technology teachers and PE teachers, then we're not talking to a chosen few here. Design thinking does not belong to any one subject. It can be used across the curriculum. It's a really important message. Because the same principles, those same stages of design thinking that I've described can be used in any subject. And in fact, they help to promote interdisciplinary learning, really, because students can see connections, because they can see how they're using the same techniques to solve problems in different subjects. And that helps them to connect not only their learning and their learning approaches, but it helps them to connect the different bodies of knowledge also. Some examples really of subjects where design thinking has been used to innovate. So the first one is mathematics, using fractions through shopping games, for example. So this would be an approach where there's a fraction store and students buy different items in parts. So they may be constructing an item and they need various parts in order to construct this particular thing. And so they have to buy those items in parts. And so those are the fractions. So using a fraction store is a different way for them to learn about fractions. So that's an example of how in mathematics, design thinking has been used. I've got some other examples for you. The next one is in science. A sort of approach really using storytelling in science. For example, what if gravity disappeared? So using that as a storytelling challenge, what if gravity disappeared? And then requiring the students then to think around that and to problem solve that using design thinking approaches. Language. So this would be where teachers would perform sort of skits, act out skits based on sort of real issues, such as, I don't know, bullying or peer pressure. Those might be examples of where those skits will create the opportunity then for design thinking to be used as part of approaches to language. And then in geography, where students produce mini newspapers which connect sort of local and global issues together. So again, they're problem solving how to produce this material by using a design thinking approach. And then if we delve deeper into some of those examples, so let's stay with mathematics then. So the challenge clearly is that math becomes confusing when students are onto fractions, let's say. I know from my own personal experience, I didn't struggle with fractions at all, but there was plenty of other areas that I did. And you know, to this day, there's people that are in my circle that really struggle with fractions, even though they're successful in their fields. So you know, it's one of those subjects that we know that some students will really struggle with, and some students will be okay with. But if we root those sort of areas into everyday life, then that challenge can be overcome using a design thinking approach, coming up with innovative ways to solve that problem. So instead of abstract numbers, then you know, using the fraction store, then students can buy items using fractions, and that anchors then understanding and builds confidence. Next example to go a bit deeper in is science. So again, abstract concepts can sometimes confuse students. And so begin with a question. Why do we stick to Earth? Is you know, a question. It builds kind of curiosity. You know, it presents to the students the challenge of answering that particular question, and then to build a story around it to stimulate their thinking and their inquiry, and you know, their use then of specific scientific principles in order to respond in that way. And then we have geography or design. You know, using design thinking around sort of geography. We could also use this with other similar subjects. So dates and locations in history, for example, feel disconnected. In geography, sort of local geography sometimes feels disconnected from sort of local geography. So again, you know, connect topics to the students' surroundings or current events. And let them try to create, or let them create mini newspapers or reports about their city and how that connects then to those global challenges that they've been studying in class. And then the next example I have is the computer science. You know, maybe students struggle with the logic flow. And so instead of jumping straight into code, can we support students to understand logic, you know, understand again that empathy again, to understand the challenge that may exist around this. So can they, you know, be better supported to understand logic using real life tasks, flowcharts or role play, or designing decisions and decision trees for daily routines. So it follows that sort of logical process through without coding to start with, you know, showing how it connects better with the real world before any coding begins, because clearly coding could present to some students, you know, the feeling of being intimidated by this new language, this new approach. But actually, if you demystify that by using some design thinking to come up with some innovative approaches to relaying logic to everyday life, then, you know, students may connect with it more readily. So again, moving through this process then, so we've seen the why, we've seen the how, we've seen specific examples. So classroom engagement then, as we've seen then, design thinking is a flexible approach or flexible process for getting the most out of the creative process to solve problems. So solve our problems as teachers, and also to stimulate and encourage students to learn problem solving by focusing on the solution as a life skill, and also to support them in their learning. And as we mentioned earlier, you know, it is used in the arts, it's used in engineering, design thinking is used in the corporate world. It'll be used as students go through their education into universities. It can be used when planning activities and events, or of course designing new products and new services. And therefore, as educators, we should be encouraged to use design thinking in every subject with every age group. Even when resources are limited, this isn't something that's going to require a brand new set of resources. It's much more around coming up with a new thinking. And I think that's the appropriate time also to reassure you that design thinking isn't something else to do. It's not something to add to that big long list that we always seem to have as educators. Instead, it's an innovative approach to the work that you are already doing. It's a process that's designed to boost creativity in all aspects of your work as a teacher, and also for you to support creativity with your students also. So it isn't something to add to the list. It's a way to look at the list and approach some of the challenges on the list from a different perspective, from a different way, using design thinking. And it works whether you are helping students to navigate a new area of the curriculum, say in maths, or in create some digital content, or whether they're using sellotape and string and some cardboard to build a model. Whatever area that the students are involved with, then design thinking can be used. We can also use design thinking to make learning a collaborative, meaningful experience. So letting students to help sort of shape projects and being assigned roles such as the researcher or the ideator or feedback generator. And so they're being stimulated to operate as though they were in a design team. But it's much more than simply designing a new product or a new service. It's being encouraged then to use those approaches to tackle some of the challenges that they have in all areas of their study. So, in other words, what we're trying to do is to frame real world challenges so that we can encourage student co-creation and assign design thinking roles in group tasks, and all of that can be centered around design thinking. Now, it's important to say that you don't need, as I mentioned you don't need a new set of resources for this. It's not like it's something that you can kind of go, well, we haven't got the resources for that. Similarly, you don't need to make big changes or suddenly have a new toolbox full of extra tools in order to start using design thinking. Again, it's not something else to do. It's not something that you need to go and get a new toolbox to do. You can begin with just one lesson. So start small, one class or one topic. And then use low-tech methods like sketching and storytelling and group work to approach design thinking around finding those areas of innovation and creativity, and allow classrooms to be this hive of creativity where no idea initially is too out there. All ideas are valid as you work towards finding approaches that can be tested and refined. So add a reflective question to the week. Invite students to find a way to improve a particular routine. And all of those, one task at a time, one class at a time, all of those activities then will, as small steps have a habit of doing, small steps, as we know, can lead to big shifts over time. Give me one sec. Now, I do want to talk before we sort of conclude and open the session up for questions. I do want to talk about some of the things that design thinking isn't. It's significant rise in popularity across various sectors, as we've looked at, and various industries over, this isn't something brand new. This is something that's been around for some time and gathering more and more momentum as it goes, as a modern day problem solving approach. But it never inevitably, like all things, it has led to some misconceptions emerging, and so I think this is a good opportunity just to bust some of those myths. So the first one that design thinking is only about design. And design thinking has design in as a term, and therefore some people can believe therefore that it's only relevant for designers. So it's good for people designing the latest iPhone, or it's good for people designing other forms of tech or cars or whatever. But actually, it's not at all only about aesthetics. In reality, as we've seen, design thinking is solution-based and user-centric. And that approach we can use to every type of problem. So it's a problem-solving framework that can be applied in all sorts of different fields, from business to strategy to education and healthcare, as we've seen. It can improve internal processes, and it can improve external processes. It can improve methods of us as teachers, and it can improve outcomes for students. So it's not just about product development. The next one is it's just brainstorming. It's not. So whilst brainstorming is an essential part of the process, and as you've heard me say, I encourage you to use brainstorming and really allow students to be really creative whenever they're doing an activity, or if you're brainstorming a challenge within your classroom or working with colleagues. I really encourage you to be really open about your brainstorming process. But to simply think that design thinking is all just about brainstorming would be very inaccurate indeed. It involves much more in-depth research. So we go beyond the brainstorming into in-depth user research. So we really get to that empathy. We define the problem. We create those prototypes and testing solutions, and then we loop back round with reflection. So design thinking is about emphasizing user needs and validating solutions, and goes beyond simply generating ideas. Of course, that is important. Brainstorming and ideating is very important, but it's not the only part of the process. The next myth to burst is it's a linear process. Because I've told you about the 5 stages, and some people call these the 5 steps. So empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Then it's common for people to then believe, therefore, that it has to be a linear process. We start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we may go back to 1 again. But it's not like that at all. Design thinking is about being flexible. What that means is that teams can go back and forth between the various stages and repeat whatever steps are necessary to refine their solutions. So it is a flexible process. It's not step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It allows much more nuancing around the approaches and much more flexibility. And again, it's focused on the solutions. It's not focused on the problem. So instead of expecting design thinking, therefore, to mean that you are locked within this rigid framework, that's not the case at all. So that's another myth that we can put an X to. Design thinking is about getting to the right answer. Well, of course, we always want to find the right answer, don't we? And I know the mathematicians and the scientists amongst you you always strive to get to the right answer, and that's absolutely critical at times. But really, with design thinking, it's more about getting the best solution to the given problem. And that may not be the right answer as we would understand the right answer to be. It's about getting to the best solution for that problem. So clearly what we want to do is we want to foster innovative solutions, but in doing so, we shouldn't naturally expect, therefore, that we're always going to see innovation in our problem solving. If we consider that the process is about finding the best solution for the problem that we've got, then that might not actually end up being the most creative option. It might be a previously used solution, or a previously known solution and a tried and tested solution. But we've tested that process by using a range of creativity to get to those different options and then choose the best solution. So it's not necessarily the right answer, it's finding the best solution by focusing on the solutions, member, and not focusing on the problem. And then the final myth to bust really is it's just a fad or a trend. I know if you've been around in education as long as people like me have, then you see things come round, and people can sometimes be forgiven for thinking that certain things are a fad or a trend, and there are lots of trends in education, as we know. But when it comes to design thinking, it's rooted in practices that have been developed over decades. And if you've come across the lean methodology and agile approaches to business, then you'll know that these are connected. So agile and lean are very, very much used in the modern workplace, and as is design thinking. So this has been something that's been refined and improved, and as it's not an educational, it's not sort of grown as an educational concept. It's grown as a solution-focused concept in all forms of industry, as I've mentioned, in all forms of different, from medical to education to different industry like technology and various others, and become a tried and tested approach that will continue to be relevant for problem solving across all industries. And again, as we prepare our children, our students for the future, not only their future educational experiences and endeavours and ambitions, but also the future workplace. And as we know, we're often preparing students today for jobs that don't yet exist. So that concept, if you like, all of the time of trying to get to those skills that will take them on that journey. And let's face it, if behemoths like Google and Apple and others such as Boeing and various others are routinely using design thinking to solve some of the most complex problems, then it has to be relevant both today in the classroom for students on their journey and as they go into the workplace. So let's close the session then, and then we'll open it up to questions by sort of reflecting a little bit on what we've learned in this masterclass today. And what I'd like you to do is to think about what's one teaching challenge that you face regularly. What's a teaching challenge that you face regularly? And what topic could you redesign using design thinking? And there's your challenge, really. What will you try in your next class? Remember what we said, small steps. This isn't about having to go and get a whole bunch of resources or a new set of tools. So small steps to introduce design thinking into your classroom, into your approaches. So what's the teaching challenge you might want to reframe, or what topic might you want to be wrestling with currently that you could use a design thinking approach to? And then the challenge, I guess, is and what would you want to try in your next class? So thank you for joining in this masterclass. The next masterclass will be about hands-on learning and prototyping. But really today's masterclass was about introducing the concept of design thinking to you, try to inspire you to see how we can use it, and also what the benefits are and some practical examples of how they can be used.